The stars were cold and silent. Beyond them, far past the edge of human reach, something old and strange had turned its gaze toward Earth. No one knew where the Virex came from. They did not share their history. They did not speak of home. They simply arrived, silent, fast, and always watching. They were tall, taller than most humans, with bodies like insects but built for war. Their armor was black, smooth, and hard like stone. Their eyes were wide and full of tiny pieces like broken glass that still saw everything. They moved with purpose, never hesitating, never stopping. They did not blink. They did not feel pain. They did not show fear. They had come to many worlds before. Some surrendered, others fought. None survived. On board their great ships, they carried weapons that could melt mountains and machines that could think faster than any human mind. They did not need to talk. They did not need to ask. They only needed to give orders, and if those orders were not followed, they erased the world that refused. Earth was next. When the first ship appeared above the moon, it looked like a shadow had been stitched into the sky. It did not glow. It did not shine. It just was, dark and unmoving at first. Then, slowly, it began to descend. Nations fell into chaos. Governments called meetings. Militaries prepared for war. Scientists tried to understand what they were seeing, but no one had answers. The Virex sent one message. It came through every screen, every speaker, every radio on the planet. You will surrender. You will obey. Or you will be removed. That was all. After that, silence. Then, a response. Not from armies, not from weapons, but from people. Leaders from across the world gathered in New York, inside the United Nations building. They argued, they debated, they begged for time. But, in the end, they agreed. They would send a team to meet the Virex face to face. Not to fight. Not yet. To talk. And so, a small group was chosen. Among them was Colonel Jason Harlow. He was not young, but he was strong. He had spent 20 years in the military, leading soldiers, making hard choices, surviving things most people couldn't imagine. He had retired 2 years ago, wanting peace. Now, he was back in uniform, standing beside the world's last hope. Next to him stood Dr. Lila Cruz. She was a scientist, not a soldier. Her job was to study life, not to fight it. She had spent her life trying to understand creatures from other planets, even when there were none to find. Now, finally, she had something real to learn from. Others joined them. Diplomats, translators, guards. But it was Harlow and Cruz who stood closest to the truth. They traveled by shuttle to the orbiting Virex craft. It was the first time any human had ever stepped foot inside one. The inside was quiet, like a tomb. Walls pulsed with soft light. Doors opened without sound. Machines watched from the corners, floating like ghosts. They were led to a room. It had no windows, no chairs, only space. And in the center of it stood the envoy. It was taller than the others. Its armor was smoother, darker. Its eyes caught the light and held it like mirrors. It did not move until they entered. Then, it spoke. Its voice was not its own. It came through a metal box built into its chest. The words were slow, flat, emotionless. You are not ready. You are not strong, you will fall. Harlow stepped forward. He kept his hands loose at his sides. His heart beat fast, but his face stayed calm. He said, "We are not afraid." The envoy did not react. It did not laugh. It did not sneer. It simply stared. Then it said, "Fear is weakness. We do not have it." "We have not known it for thousands of years," Harlow asked. "What happens if we say no?" The envoy tilted its head slightly. Not quite a nod, not quite a question. "Then you die." Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. Lila Cruz stepped forward. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. She asked, "Why us? Why now?" The envoy looked at her, then back at Harlow. "Because you are here. Because you are weak. Because you can be taken. Harlow took a breath. He looked at the envoy straight into its eyes. He said, "We won't go quietly." For the first time, the envoy paused. Its head tilted again, slower this time, as if considering something new. Then, it turned and walked away, vanishing through a door that closed behind it. The meeting was over. Back on Earth, the world waited. The envoy had left. The message was clear: surrender or die. But something else lingered in the minds of those who had seen the envoy up close. There had been a moment, just one. When the envoy paused, when it looked at Harlow and stopped talking. No one knew what it meant. But Lila Cruz thought about it more than anyone. She reviewed the footage, slowed it down, watched the envoy's eyes, its mandibles, the way its body shifted ever so slightly when Harlow looked at it. Something had changed. Not much, but enough. She didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Days passed. The Virex did nothing. No attack, no movement, just silence. Some hoped they had changed their minds. Others feared they were planning something worse. Harlow returned home. He sat on his porch, drank coffee, and watched the sun rise. He didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel brave. He felt tired. But deep in his bones, he knew something. The envoy had lied. They did feel something. He had seen it. In the way it looked at him. In the way it stopped. In the way it left. Whatever they said, whatever they believed, they were not fearless. They just didn't know it yet. The silence from the Virex lasted longer than anyone expected. Days turned into weeks. No attack came. No message was sent. Their ships remained in orbit, unmoving like statues in the sky. People began to hope. Some said the Virex had changed their minds. Others believed they were simply waiting for the right moment to strike. But most didn't care about theories, they cared about staying alive. On Earth, preparations continued. Armies trained. Weapons were built. Bunkers were filled with food and water. Everyone knew the truth. Peace was only a pause. Colonel Jason Harlow stayed out of the spotlight. He returned to his quiet life, living alone in a small house outside of town. He didn't want fame. He didn't ask for medals. He just wanted to sleep without dreams of those cold, unblinking eyes. But Dr. Lila Cruz could not stop thinking. She spent her time watching the footage from the first meeting. She studied every second, every movement, every sound. She went over it again and again, trying to understand what had happened when Harlow looked directly at the envoy. Something had changed. Just for a moment. The envoy had stopped speaking. Its body had shifted slightly. Its voice had paused, not broken, not shaken, but delayed, like something inside it had hesitated. Lila wasn't sure what that meant. But she knew it mattered, so she called for another meeting. Not because the Virex asked for it, but because she needed answers. The world leaders agreed. If there was even a chance that something had shifted in the enemy's mind, they had to find out. And so, a second meeting was set. Harlow was asked to come back. He didn't want to. He told them no, at first. He had done enough. He had stared into those eyes once. He didn't want to do it again, but Lila convinced him. "You saw something," she said. "I saw it too. We need to know what it means." So he agreed. This time, the meeting would be different. More controlled, more prepared. Cameras would record everything. Scientists would monitor the envoy's behavior. Soldiers would stand ready, though they were told not to move unless ordered. Harlow wore his uniform again. Not because he wanted to, but because it was expected. He stepped onto the shuttle that would take him into orbit, toward the same dark ship that had met them before. As they approached, the ship opened its doors as if it had been waiting. Inside, everything was the same. Cold walls, silent halls, machines that watched without blinking. They were led to the same room. The envoy stood in the center, tall, silent, waiting. Harlow took a breath. Then he stepped forward. The envoy spoke first this time. Its voice, flat and emotionless, echoed through the chamber. "You return." Harlow nodded. "We have questions." The envoy tilted its head slightly. "Questions are not useful." Harlow looked at Lila. She gave a small nod. He turned back to the envoy. "Then tell me this," he said. "Why haven't you attacked?" The envoy did not answer right away. It stood still, too still. Then, slowly, it raised its head, its many eyes locked onto Harlow's face. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Harlow did something dangerous. He lifted his helmet visor. His eyes met the envoy's. Directly, fully, completely. The effect was instant. The envoy froze. Its mandibles twitched. A low hum filled the room. One of the scientists whispered, "What the hell?" The envoy suddenly stepped back. Not fast, not panicked, but, its voice cracked through the speakers. "End now." Then it turned and left the room. The door closed behind it. Silence fell. Everyone stared at the place where it had stood. Lila rushed to the monitors. Her fingers flew across the screen. "Look at this," she said. Its neural readings spiked. Something happened in its brain. Harlow lowered his visor slowly. He felt something too. Not pain, not fear, but something deep. Like the envoy had seen something it didn't expect, something it couldn't understand. He looked at Lila. "What did I do?" She shook her head. "I don't know, but we need to find out." Back on Earth, the data was analyzed quickly. Scientists pored over the readings. Military leaders debated what to do next. The envoy's reaction was unlike anything recorded before. For the first time in known history, a Virex being had shown an emotional response. Not logic, not calculation, something else. Something new. Lila presented her findings to the council. "Whatever they say about themselves," she told them, "they're not as emotionless as they claim. Something about direct eye contact triggered a reaction. We need to test it again." Harlow disagreed. "No," he said. "We don't know what we're dealing with. We don't know what that look does to them, or to us." But the decision wasn't his to make. A third meeting was scheduled. This time, the plan was clear. Harlow would make eye contact again, and this time they would watch closely. When the day came, the team was ready. Cameras lined the walls. Sensors were placed around the room. Scientists waited with pens in hand, recording every detail. Harlow stood at the center. His heart beat hard in his chest. He remembered the last time, how the envoy had reacted, how it had stepped back, how it had left. He wasn't afraid, but he was nervous. The envoy entered, tall, dark, still. Harlow took a slow breath. The envoy spoke. "You should not have come." Harlow stepped forward. "We need to understand you." The envoy looked at him. Harlow lifted his visor. Their eyes met again. This time the reaction was stronger. The envoy's body jerked. Its mandibles snapped open. High-pitched noise came from its chest unit. Then, for the first time ever, a Virex envoy turned and fled. It moved fast, not in panic, but in haste. The door slammed shut behind it. Silence filled the room. Lila stared at the screen. "This is impossible," she whispered. Harlow looked at her. "What's happening to them?" She didn't answer, because she didn't know. But she knew one thing. They had found a weakness, not in strength, not in weapons, but in something deeper. Something buried inside the Virex mind. Something ancient. Something they had forgotten. Something that feared human eyes in the days that followed. The world changed. The Virex did not send another envoy. Their fleet remained in orbit. But something was different. Communication between their ships became erratic. Orders were delayed. Some units failed to respond. Others pulled back. The once unstoppable force showed signs of uncertainty. Harlow watched from the ground. He didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel powerful. He just felt confused. "How?" he asked Lila. She shook her head. Maybe their ancestors were hunted by creatures with eyes like ours. Maybe that fear is coded into them. Maybe looking into our eyes reminds them of something they've tried to forget. Harlow thought about that. He thought about how easy it had been. Just a look, just a moment, just a man staring into something that claimed to feel nothing. And yet, something had changed. The world watched as the Virex began to act strangely. Their once perfect coordination showed signs of breakdown. Ships that had hovered silently above Earth for weeks started moving without clear purpose. Some drifted away from orbit. Others changed positions without explanation. No attack came. No message was sent. It was like watching a machine begin to fail, slowly, quietly, but surely. Back on Earth, governments scrambled to understand what was happening. Scientists studied the data from the second and third meetings. Military leaders debated their next move. But among all the voices, one name kept coming up: Jason Harlow. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He didn't want to be a hero. But something about him had shaken the Virex. Something about his eyes had made them hesitate. And now everyone wanted answers. Harlow was called back into service. Not as a commander, not as a fighter, but as a test subject. At a secure facility hidden deep in the mountains of Colorado, he was placed under observation. Every movement, every heartbeat, every breath was recorded. Scientists ran scans. Psychologists asked questions. Biologists took samples, but nothing unusual was found. Harlow was just a man, tired, older than most soldiers, quiet. But somehow, he had become the only thing that could make the Virex pause. Leela Cruz led the research team. She worked day and night, trying to understand why eye contact had such an effect. She pored over old records looking for any clue in the Virex's past. She reviewed footage again and again, searching for patterns, and slowly a theory formed. The Virex were not always rulers. Once, long ago, they may have been prey. Evolution had shaped them into warriors, but some part of their ancient minds still remembered fear. And human eyes, forward-facing, focused, full of intent, might remind them of something buried deep in their history. A predator. Something they once feared. Something they had tried to forget. Lila shared her findings with the council. At first, many dismissed it as impossible. How could something so simple be the key to defeating a species that had conquered entire worlds? But then she played the footage. The moment Harlow looked into the envoy's eyes. The pause. The twitch. The retreat. There was no denying it. So the idea was born. What if Harlow wasn't just a witness? What if he was a weapon? Not one that fired bullets or dropped bombs, but one that simply looked. Harlow was taken to a new location, a military base near the coast. From there, he was flown to the front lines. There was no battle yet. The Virex had not launched a full attack. But small groups of their forces had landed in remote areas, recon units, scouts, silent observers. They had begun to spread across the planet. Until now, every human force that engaged them was defeated. The Virex moved too fast. They adapted too quickly. Their weapons burned through armor like paper. But this time would be different. This time Harlow walked toward them. He wore no heavy gear, no rifle, no explosives, just a uniform and a helmet. His face was visible. His eyes were ready. Behind him, soldiers waited in cover. Drones hovered high, above. Cameras followed his every step. He approached alone. The Virex unit saw him. They did not charge. They did not fire. They stood still. Then, slowly, Harlow lifted his visor. His eyes met theirs. For the first time, he wasn't behind glass. He wasn't hiding behind metal. He was fully exposed. And the Virex reacted. One of them staggered back. Another tilted its head, confused. A third turned and fled. The rest hesitated. Then chaos broke out. Units that had been perfectly coordinated moments before began to break formation. Some moved away from Harlow. Others collided with each other. One even fired at its own kind. Within minutes, the entire group was in disarray. Harlow didn't run. He didn't shout. He just walked forward, past them, through them, leaving silence in his wake. When the drones scanned the area 10 minutes later, the Virex were gone, scattered, retreated, defeated, without a single shot fired. Back at command, the footage was reviewed again and again. It was real. It was working. Lila sat in the war room with generals and scientists. Maps covered the walls. Red dots marked Virex landings across the globe. She pointed to one. "This one," she said. "We send him here next." A general frowned. "You want to send one man into enemy territory?" "Yes," she said. "Because he doesn't fight, he walks, and wherever he goes, they fall apart." The plan was set. Harlow became a symbol, not of strength, not of violence, but of presence. He traveled from one zone to another. Each time he faced the Virex alone. Each time he made eye contact. Each time, the same result. The Virex faltered. Some fled. Others collapsed. A few even destroyed themselves. The world watched, in awe. A war that seemed unwinnable was turning, and the man who had once only wanted peace had become the only hope left. But not everything went smoothly. There were failures. In one mission, Harlow entered a ruined city where a Virex patrol had taken position. He walked down the street, helmet off, eyes open. But this time, the Virex did not react. They stood tall. They raised their weapons. They fired. Harlow barely escaped. Later, analysis showed that the unit had been newly deployed. Younger, less experienced. They had not seen the earlier battles. They had not heard the stories. They did not know what his eyes could do, so they did not fear them. The lesson was clear. The effect was not universal. It only worked when the Virex remembered or when they had seen others react before. Like a virus, the fear needed to spread, and not every mind caught it the same way. Still, the success rate was high. More than 70% of encounters ended with the Virex retreating, and that was enough. Enough to give humanity hope. Enough to change the course of the war. Enough to make the Virex question everything they thought they knew. As the weeks passed, more reports came in. Virex ships abandoning missions, entire battalions refusing orders, commanders disappearing. Some believed the species was breaking apart from within. Others thought they were preparing something worse. But Lila suspected the truth. The Virex weren't adapting. They were unraveling. Their belief in their own strength was crumbling, and Harlow was the reason. He didn't ask for it. He didn't want it. But he carried it anyway. Each time he stepped onto the battlefield, he knew what would happen. Not because he was brave, but because he had learned one thing. Fear is powerful, but sometimes all it takes is someone who refuses to look away. The Virex were falling apart, not all at once, not in every place, but enough to be noticed. Reports came in from across the world. Units that had once moved like machines now hesitated. Orders were questioned. Some Virex simply stopped fighting and disappeared into the forests or oceans. Others turned on their own kind, attacking without reason. It was as if something inside them had broken, and the name on everyone's lips was still the same: Jason Harlow. He walked where others feared to go. He stood where armies had fallen. He did not carry weapons. He did not shout commands. He only looked. And wherever he looked, the Virex faltered. But not everything stayed easy. As the war changed, so did the enemy. Some Virex began to avoid him. When they saw him coming, they ran before he could make eye contact. They pulled back from cities, from towns, from bases. They left behind weapons, ships, even prisoners. It was the closest thing to surrender that anyone had seen. But others fought harder. Some units learned from the failures of their kind. They covered their eyes. They wore dark visors. They refused to look at him directly. And those who followed this new rule, those who avoided his gaze, they kept fighting. They were fewer in number, But they were dangerous, because they knew what he could do, and they wanted to stop it. Harlow was sent to a city in the north. It had once been full of people. Now it was ruins and silence. A large Virex force had taken control of the area. Unlike other groups, these ones had not fled when Harlow arrived. They had prepared for him. When he stepped into the city, he felt it right away. The air was different. There was no hesitation, no fear, only waiting. He walked through the streets slowly. His helmet was off. His face was exposed. He scanned the buildings, the shadows, the rooftops, nothing moved. Then suddenly gunfire, it came from above, from behind, from everywhere at once. Harlow dropped to the ground just in time. The bullets missed him by inches. Smoke filled the air. Dust rose like ghosts. From cover, he saw them. Virex soldiers, but not like the ones he had faced before. Their faces were hidden behind dark plates. Their eyes were covered. They moved fast. They shot with precision. They had trained for this. They had studied his past battles. They had learned how to fight someone who didn't use weapons. They wouldn't look at him, so he couldn't break them. Harlow crawled behind a wall. He radioed for backup. "We've got a problem," he said. Lila Cruz answered. "What kind of problem?" "They're not afraid." She was quiet for a moment. "Then we need to change the plan." Back at base, the team worked quickly. If some Virex had learned to avoid his eyes, then the old way wouldn't work anymore. They needed something new, something stronger. Lila had an idea. She went to the command center and asked for a broadcast. "Signal. We need to show them," she said. "We need to remind them what happens when they do look." They agreed. Within hours, images of Harlow were sent across every channel the Virex used. Footage of past battles, clips of Virex retreating, of envoys running, of entire units breaking apart, and at the center of it all, Harlow, his face, his eyes, his calm stare. It was a message, one that spread faster than any bullet, and it worked. Even among the strongest Virex, doubt crept in. Some whispered about the human who stared. Others remembered the feeling they had when they first saw him. That pause, that fear, that strange ancient memory. And slowly, the line between those who fought and those who fled began to blur. Units that had held strong began to question orders. Scouts returned with stories of seeing their own kind fall apart. Commanders found themselves ignored. The Virex Empire was cracking, and Harlow was still walking. He went from one battlefield to another. Each time, the same pattern played out. Those who looked at him lost their will to fight. Those who didn't, look kept going for a while. But soon even they began to break, not because of his eyes, but because of what they represented. Fear, doubt, weakness, everything the Virex had tried to erase from themselves. Now, it was coming back, and they couldn't stop it. In a hidden room deep inside a Virex ship, a meeting took place, not of humans, of Virex. They stood in silence for a long time. Then one spoke. "He has changed us." Another replied, "We are not what we were." A third added, "We have known weakness." They looked at each other. For the first time in thousands of years, they hesitated. One of them reached up and removed its visor. Its many eyes blinked. Then it spoke again. "We must leave." No one argued. No one gave orders. They simply nodded. And then, they began to plan. The retreat. On Earth, the change was clear. Virex ships started to move away from orbit. At first, only a few. Then more. Then most. They didn't attack. They didn't speak. They just left. Some bases surrendered without a fight. Others vanished overnight. A few remained, hiding in remote places, too afraid to return home. The war was ending. Not with fire, not with blood, but with silence. And the man who had made it happen stood at the edge of a ruined city, watching the sky. Lila walked up beside him. "It's over," she said. Harlow didn't answer right away. He looked at the stars, at the empty space where the Virex had been. Then he said, "No, it's not." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He turned to her. "I think they're just starting to understand what they've become." She thought about that and she realized he was right. The Virex had ruled through strength, through fearlessness. But now they knew what fear felt like, and they would never be the same. The sky was quiet. No ships, no lights, no signs of the Virex. They had left. Not all at once. Not all together. But slowly, one by one, their dark shapes rose from orbit and disappeared into space. Some vanished without warning. Others sent messages, broken, confused signals that said nothing and everything. "We are leaving. We do not understand. We cannot stay." And then, silence. Earth watched as the enemy who had once threatened to erase them simply walked away. There were no celebrations at first. People waited for the trick, for the trap, for the next wave of attack that never came. But after weeks passed and then months, the truth became clear. The war was over, and humanity had won, not with weapons, not with force, but with something. The Virex had forgotten how to feel. Fear. And the man who made it happen stood alone on a hill outside a small town, watching the wind move through the trees. Jason Harlow didn't look like a hero. He wore old clothes. His face was tired. His eyes were calm. He didn't want fame. He didn't ask for thanks. He just wanted peace. And now, he finally had it. But the world wouldn't let him go so easily. Reports spread across the planet about what had happened. Scientists tried to explain it. Historians wrote about it. Soldiers told stories around fires, about the man who stared down an empire. Some called him a legend, others called him lucky, a few called him dangerous, but everyone knew his name. Harlow avoided interviews. He turned down medals. He refused offers to speak at conferences or sit on councils. He didn't want to be a symbol. He didn't want to be remembered, but he was, because what he had done changed everything, not just for Earth, but for the Virex, too. Back in deep space, far beyond human reach, the last of the Virex fleets gathered. They did not return home. They could not. Something inside them had broken. For thousands of years, they had ruled without fear, without weakness. They had built an empire on the belief that they were above emotion, that they were perfect machines of war. But now they remembered something else, something buried deep in their past. A time when they had not been rulers, when they had not been strong, when they had looked up into the sky and seen something bigger than themselves and felt fear. It had taken a long time to forget, but even longer to remember, and now they couldn't unsee it. Some among them wanted to fight back, to return, to erase the humans before the fear spread further, but others disagreed. One voice rose above the rest. "We are not what we were." Another added, "We have seen ourselves." And another, "We must change." So they left, not in defeat, but in understanding. Their empire would not fall, but it would never be the same. And somewhere, in the darkest corners of their minds, they would always remember the human who looked them in the eye and made them feel something they had not felt in thousands of years: fear. On Earth, life began to rebuild. Cities that had been damaged were repaired. Families reunited. Soldiers returned home. The governments that had worked together during the war stayed united. The fear of the Virex had brought them closer, and now, even in peace, they chose to remain that way. New laws were made. Weapons were limited. War was no longer seen as strength. It was seen as failure. And in every school, in every history book, the story of Jason Harlow was told, not as a warrior, not as a killer, but as someone who understood something deeper. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is look someone in the eye and not look away. Lila Cruz. Stayed close to Harlow, though she knew he needed space. She continued her research. She studied the footage. She wrote reports. She gave lectures. And she kept asking questions. Why had it worked? Was it only Harlow? Could it happen again? She believed the answer lay in the Virex's past, in the ancient memory that had been triggered by human eyes. She believed that once, long ago, the Virex had been hunted by something with forward-facing eyes, something that had stared at them the way Harlow did. That fear had never truly gone away. It had only been buried. And now, it had returned. She shared her findings with the world, not just for science, but for warning. The Virex may come back, one day, if they find a way to forget fear again. And if they do, Earth needs to be ready, not with weapons, but with people like Harlow. People who know the power of presence, of courage, of looking into the unknown and not blinking. Years passed. Harlow lived quietly. He grew older. He walked less. But still, he watched. He watched the sky. He watched the stars. He watched for movement, and when asked if he thought the Virex would return, he only smiled. "I don't know," he said. "But if they do, I'll be here." And he meant it, not because he wanted to fight, but because he believed in something more. That fear can be faced. That strength comes not from weapons, but from standing tall, even when the world is watching, even when the enemy is near, even when all you have is your eyes and your will to use them.